you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens, my name is Elaine, and today I'm going to show you all how to make a killer Umbris Fear Manifest commander deck for roughly $80. Umbris Fear Manifest is a Dimir commander. He costs 1 black, 1 blue, and 3 colorless mana to cast. He's a legendary 1/1 Nightmare Horror with the following ability. Umbris Fear Manifest gets +1/+1 for each card your opponents own in exile. Whenever Umbris or another Nightmare Horror enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a land card. So your ultimate goal with this deck is to stay alive long enough to reduce your opponent's libraries to nothing. Since your opponents will be exiling cards from the top of their library whenever you cast Umbris or another Nightmare Horror from your deck, you want to stack your deck with a lot of horrors and nightmares that will activate his ability and help you achieve your goal. And since this goal can take a while to achieve, especially if you're in a 4-person pod, you want to begin by setting up your field with lower cost creatures that will help you stay alive long enough for your deck to start going to work. Examples include Banehound, which is a 1-cost with lifelink and haste, and Haunt of the Dead Marshes, which allows you to scry 1 when it enters the battlefield. Ruin Crab, which has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 3 cards. And 2-cost creatures like Fathom Feeder, Hunted Horror, Monstrosity, Misery Shadow, Thing in the Ice, and Wharf Infiltrator. After you set up your board with some basic protection, you want to roll your Beastly King out and start getting nasty by casting a brutal series of spells that will send your enemy's lands and spells into exile. Examples of creatures that fall into this category are Nemesis of Reason. Whenever Nemesis of Reason attacks, defending player mills 10 cards. And Teresian Mindbreaker. Whenever Teresian Mindbreaker attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded up. Sorceries that fall into this category include Fractured Sanity. Each opponent mills 14 cards. It also has Cycling. When you cycle Fractured Sanity, each opponent mills 4 cards. Maddening Cacophony, which can be kicked. Each opponent mills 8 cards. If the spell was kicked, instead each opponent mills half their library rounded up. And Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. There are also artifacts and enchantments that assist with this. Examples include Lantern of the Lost. When Lantern of the Lost enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard. It also has a 1-tap ability, Exile Lantern of the Lost. Exile all cards from all graveyards, then draw a card. And Web of Inertia. At the beginning of combat in each opponent's turn, that player may exile a card from their graveyard. If the player doesn't, creatures they control can't attack you this turn. I like this card in particular because if an opponent can't exile a card from their graveyard, they can't attack you, which allows you to stay alive even longer and continue your journey toward the total devastation of your enemies. To help you survive the brutal battles that take part during the heart of the game, I've included spells that will allow you to cast cards you have exiled from your opponent's libraries and hands. Examples include Author of Shadows, which, when Author of Shadows enters the battlefield, exile all opponents' graveyards. Choose a non-land card exiled this way. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. Brainstealer Dragon, which has flying, and at the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of each opponent's library. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. It also has the added bonus that whenever a non-land permanent an opponent owns enters a battlefield under your control, they lose life equal to its mana value. And Intellect Devourer, which has Devour Intellect. When Intellect Devourer enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles a card from their hand until Intellect Devourer leaves the battlefield. And Body Thief. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled with Intellect Devourer. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. An Elder Brain, which has Menace. Whenever Elder Brain attacks a player, exile all cards from that player's hand. Then they draw that many cards. You may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remained exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. It's important to keep in mind, however, that Umbris's growth and power is based off the amount of cards your opponents own in exile. Thus, it becomes a bit of a balancing act. How much should you take out of exile and play for yourself? What's worth playing to stay alive? Do you even need to cast those cards to stay alive? Or should you simply let Umbris become an all-powerful god that can murder your enemies with a single hit of commander damage? Especially when coupled with a card like Rogue's Passage, which has a tap ability that keeps a creature from being blocked this turn. These are all things for you to decide. Finally, there are some spells that interact with your opponent's cards and help reduce the size of their board or keep it from ever developing. Examples include the classic counter spell, as well as things like Dissipate, Blot Out, and Mind Flayer, which allows you to gain control of a target creature when it enters the battlefield for as long as you have control of Mind Flayer. In the interest of time, I won't mention all of the other cards in this deck, which synergize with Umbris to destroy your enemies. Instead, I'll include a full deck list down below in the description so you can see what this deck has to offer for yourself. And there you have it, my deck tech for Umbris Fear Manifest. What did you think of my deck tech? Are you interested in Umbris, or do you have an Umbris deck already? What do you think of decks that revolve around exiling your opponent's cards? Let me know down below in the comments. I always like to know what you kings, queens, and in-betweens think. And if you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue, subscribe, ring that bell so you'll always know what's up, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye guys!
Tisha Valenza, aka Poison Ivy, and you've just been watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch.